Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we're going back to what I believe is the greatest of all time survival horror video game series. We're talking about Dead Space. Not you. We're talking about Dead Space. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with the announcement of the release date of Dead Space 1 Remake, I feel a little in the middle on that game right now. I don't know if I'm buying that release date. We haven't seen like full-on gameplay. We're seeing these like developer live streams of them testing the sound, listening to feedback, changing the sound of guns. We're doing art streams, but we have yet to have a true full-on gameplay reveal. And after Starfield being delayed, I'm scarred. I bought in hook, line, and sinker on that release date, and it being delayed has absolutely ruined a chunk of my year. I will absolutely admit that. Anyway, with Dead Space coming out in January, potentially, I wanted to remember Dead Space 1, 2, and 3, as these are very significant games to me. And of course, we'll return to these games with the release of Dead Space Remake, so fret not, won't be the last Dead Space video that you see on the channel. Let's start off with the first Dead Space. On the back, it says, "There's no help coming. A massive deep space mining ship goes dark after unearthing a strange artifact on a distant planet. Engineer Isaac Clarke embarks on the repair mission, only to uncover a nightmarish bloodbath. The ship's crew horribly slaughtered and infected by an alien scourge. Now Isaac is cut off, trapped, and engaged in a desperate fight for survival," where it says that the key points are: strategically dismember the necromorph enemies, limb by bloody limb, zero gravity, and uncover the horrific truth of this shocking thriller. Cracking it open. I think this is one of the most iconic box arts of all time, by the way, just the one hand coming out like that. I really, really dig it. This game just has such a style and flair to it all. Black and white manual here, which is kind of surprising because one of the defining factors of this game to me is the heads-up display, or really lack thereof. So I thought they'd get a little creative, a little cheeky with that, but they show you some of the guns here that you get to use: the Ripper, Contact Beam, Force Gun, Flamethrower, obviously the most iconic one being the Plasma Cutter. That really defined the series. The variety of abilities you get. Inside here, it says Go Beyond the Game, where they have Dead Space Downfall available on DVD and Blu-ray. I actually know nothing about this, but it looks like a Dead Space anime based off that here. Comic maybe? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, but that's in there. It wasn't even aware. I bought all three of these games for a combined $70 on Mercari. Not bad for the bundle. Not super ideal, though. I thought it was a little pricey. Let's talk about Dead Space 1 for starters. I went back and replayed all these games last year for a project on my Mr. Matty channel called The Life and Death of Dead Space. Of course, it flopped, but this was a video project I was really proud of because I got to get into the nitty-gritty of a series I already loved, and I fell in love with it even more. Obviously, we got to talk about dismemberment to really talk about Dead Space. This is the defining quality, right? So when this game was being pre-produced, they were taking a strong look at Resident Evil 4, a game we've also played here on this channel for the first time. And they were looking at it and saying, like, we love the vibe of this game. We want to make the next big survival horror game. And what they did was went forward with Dead Space, and they made this game where you would just have these enemies that crawl at you in these demented, disgusting fashions, and you'd piece them apart. And that's why the Plasma Cutter was such a satisfying weapon, because one thing I love about Dead Space is all the weapons you use outside of like the compact gun comes to mind and the fusion rifle are like these engineering tools, because Isaac Clarke is an engineer. So the Plasma Cutter isn't even designed to take people's bodies apart, but he uses it for that reasoning anyway. And I always found that to be so cool. Maybe it's a little bit of a lore junkie move on my behalf, because what really matters is when the necromorphs are coming at you and you're just taking off the limbs that are going to harm you and gradually killing them. It's a rare experience where instead of shooting the body, shooting the head like you do in any type of shooting game, third or first person, instead you're shooting the body parts off, and that's doing the most damage. To me, that was just an incredible thing at the time. And I managed to get through this game. This is how I knew I loved it. I am such a wimp with horror games. I am an easy target. I really struggle to get through these bad boys. I went through Dead Space even in its scariest moments, because I loved that gameplay. I loved that atmosphere, the silence of the Ishimura, just the humming of the engines and the crawling of necromorphs in the tubes above you. You didn't know really where enemies would spring out against you because some of those encounters were dynamic. Absolutely a riveting experience, a hand-sweating, heart-pounding type of experience. One thing I also really liked about Dead Space 1, and this is why I'm a little iffy on the remake, I liked a voiceless Isaac for the first game because it made the main character of the first game, the Ishimura, and the mystery surrounding that. Why was everyone losing their minds? What were these necromorphs? Where did they come from? And because Isaac was silent and because you weren't talking much, you'd hear these faint whispers that play a bigger part into the narrative. And if you listen really closely at some of the gameplay, like some of the things they say to you are really messed up. I love that stuff. Like it felt like Isaac too was losing his mind as he went deeper and deeper into Ishimura, trying to figure out what happened here. And of course, he's driven by the love of his girlfriend, Nicole, and he's trying to find out what happened to her. That's a big building block in Dead Space 2, which we'll talk about. But you can tell he's very driven by her. And when you get to the end of this game, you're like, very interesting. That's also what I love about this game is you're never kind of winning. Like, Isaac Clarke is a hero, but he's a tragic hero at that. Like, he has a awful life. His life sucks, man. So, Dead Space 1 just really takes the cake for its atmosphere, its gameplay systems, everything about it. Like, to me, Dead Space 1 is survival horror perfection. It's another reason why I'm very hesitant about the remake, because they're going to add voice work into it. There's going to be a lot of changes alongside it. I don't know, man. I'm very rarely a purist. I'm up for a lot of remakes and remasters. I'm like, what could go wrong? For some reason, I am very protective of Dead Space. I just feel like this is one of those lightning in the bottle moments that you can't really recreate because there's a lot of under-the-hood design decisions that a team had a particular vibe, goal of design for. Again, like the no talking was intentional because of the fact of the whispering, the way you were receiving commands, and how that plays into the overall story. I feel like there were so many intentional reasons to have Isaac silence and then be speaking in game 2 that, again, I'm a little in the middle. That's not to say, let's talk about Dead Space 2, that I hate the voice work. I actually really like it because Dead Space 2 is elevated by it because its design was intended to have voice work in it. Because one of the big complaints a lot of people have with Dead Space 1 is that you're just receiving orders and following them kind of blindly. I get that. I respect that. We'll get into that a little bit more. Let's talk about Dead Space 2. On the back, it says, "Bring the terror to space." After waking from a coma on a massive space city known as the Sprawl, Isaac Clarke must battle dementia, the government, and visions of his dead girlfriend as he dominates a gruesome new necromorph onslaught. Tear through space with full 360-degree movement, wield devastating tools to dominate the alien outbreak, and fight online as a human or necromorph in brutal combat across the Sprawl. You'll see here it says it has an online pass. EA was really out of the pocket during these days with their silly online passes, and it got worse with this bad boy right here. We'll talk about it, but let's crack it open for now. It does not come with the online pass. That's okay. I'm not going to need it. The servers are pretty much shut down as far as I know. This one is also black and white, much like the first manual here. A lot of you may wonder why I went with the PS3 version. It was really just because it came in a nice bundle. These copies look clean, and for me, I like the option of having trophies because I already played all of these extensively on the Xbox 360. This is where the bench was really expanded upon. Not to the level of Dead Space 3, but where you really started to see some significant upgrades. And the inclusion of like Dead Space Online multiplayer, I thought was really not something the game needed, but this was at a time where the way you succeeded in the early 2010s was by including multiplayer in your game. And so you'd see a lot of stuffed in multiplayer, some of it successful, some of it not so successful. This is interesting. Playing behind a firewall or router. This game uses the following network ports to play online. If you're running a firewall, ensure it is set to allow the game to communicate on these ports, both inbound and outbound. I've never seen that before. Maybe that's a common thing there, but I have never, ever seen that before. Anyway, let's talk about Dead Space 2. So I said Dead Space 1 is survival horror perfection. Do I think Dead Space 2 tarnishes that? No, it enhances that. It enhances that. Dead Space 2's chapters 1 through 6. Not that the rest is bad, but 1 through 6 is one of the most perfect beginnings to a video game, right? You wake up, you're playing directly through the aftermath of Dead Space 1. Isaac's clearly losing his mind. You're immediately very vulnerable, no weapons, running from the necromorphs. It has this good mixture of action elements, while still leaving you stranded with limited supplies. And there are moments like when your ghostly girlfriend yanks you out of the tubes and tries to stab you with a syringe that will go down in history as one of my biggest jump scares. Like, my heart was pounding for like 15 minutes straight. I was still like trying to come down back to earth after that one happened, because I did not expect it. Her eyes like being all warped really messed with me, like really creepy look. But again, that's what I love about Dead Space, is no matter how much I was pooping in my pants, I was pushing through all the way to the end of the game. Dead Space 2, as I mentioned, really does push the voice work in this game. Now Isaac is communicating with all these different people on the sprawl instead of just receiving orders through his headphones, and he's like, okay, off over there I go. It's also a lot more open-ended. While Dead Space 1 felt more segmented, you know, ship section by ship section by ship section, say that 10 times fast, Dead Space 2 was this more open-ended city with some real vistas. It was a beautiful game. For those who don't know, this is one of the most expensive video game projects ever. Millions, hundreds of millions of dollars sunk into this. And you can really see it all throughout, through its set pieces, through the amount of testing this game went through, the multiplayer setup. Like, this was designed to be the big breakout hit for Visceral. And it was phenomenal. It's just, I don't know if it could ever make the money that they put into it. $500 million is what they put into it. That is insane to think about for a survival horror game, a series of games that a lot of people kind of wimp out on and go watch on YouTube in Let's Plays instead. It's understandable. As a wimp myself, I get it, but it really hurts the sales of these franchises. And I think Resident Evil has managed to now find a good in-between, but they're doing one thing that Dead Space did as well, pushing the quality, investing heavily, and people are really buying in. So Dead Space 2, for me, it was that blending of action and tension, that seamless back and forth that always really got me. I also liked the improvements they brought to zero gravity. So zero gravity was in the first game, but the camera felt very fixated. Like, when you jumped from one end of the room to the other, there was no real motion. You just were going from point A to point B. But now, as the back of the box art says, there's full 360-degree movement in zero gravity. So there are a lot of moments where you are messing with that. It allows for the puzzles to really flex their muscles, for them to mess around with a lot of creative systems in the game. And there are some cool, even mini games in there. I like how I'm talking about cool stuff. I mean, can we talk about the preschool section in this game where you got to fight a bunch of toddlers that are necromorphs and literally stomp them out? It's just wrong, man. It's just wrong. But it goes so far that it's amazing that it's actually there. I talked about stomping. You're probably surprised we went this deep into the video. We got to talk about the iconic stomp. Oh my gosh. So Dead Space 1 had the stomp. You're like, okay, cool. Dead Space 2 said, what if the stomp was a looting mechanism? Okay. I don't know what sadistic person came up with the idea of literally crushing beneath your steel-plated boots every enemy corpse and having money, ammo pop out of them and giving Isaac the most incredible, like, scream. But it worked beautifully, and everyone thought it was satisfying. And we all feel like low-key murderers because of it, because it was just like, I shouldn't really enjoy this, but I don't know, it's a fun little gameplay mechanic here. It's one of the most inventive loot mechanics in the industry. No one can do it. It's kind of how I feel about HK-47, right? HK-47 in KOTOR has such a specific speaking style that if anyone were even to take light inspiration from it, you would know clearly where the source was, and it would feel a little less creative because of it. Not that you couldn't do it, it would just be too obvious that you're peeling off the back of something else that was not your original idea. With Dead Space, if you were to start stomping out enemies with your foot, to get ammo, to get money, whatever else you could get from them. And you start to see the loot vomit in all these games where like orange, purple, green popping out of their bodies. You would immediately know, like, oh, that's Dead Space. I think the closest we've gotten to it was probably Neo 2. Neo 2 had a dismemberment system where once an enemy died, you could take off every limb except their torso, and there would be loot popping out. But it wasn't the defining mechanic. It was just like, you not only killed them, but you brutalized them. So I feel like Dead Space 2 is where the series gore really kicked it up a notch, and it started to create an identity for the series. So then Dead Space 3 rolls along. I can only look at you in disappointment. I played this recently, and I was thinking, like, maybe this is kind of a dumb, fun game. But here's why, before we do the complete box experience, here's why I got a problem with Dead Space 3. One thing I didn't want to really talk about too much in this video until we do like full-on recaps of these games towards the release of the Dead Space Remake is these games have great stories. Isaac goes from this voiceless protagonist who's struggling with a lot of mental health issues to, again, a tragic hero and speaking for himself and fighting his demons, aka his dead girlfriend. And it's a really gripping story between both personal and grand levels. Like, of course, it's a save the world story. Don't let this get back to Earth. But it's also a story about Isaac coping with a lot of things that just happened to him. Like, he didn't really have control. Like, he volunteered to go fix the Ishimura because he hadn't heard from his girlfriend in a while. And he turned out like this. Like, it's a really sad story. And then Dead Space 3 rolls along. You come on board and you screw it all up. The back of the box says, team up and take down the terror together. One of the defining qualities of the game, co-op. Head planetside and explore a hostile new environment. Discover the truth, stop the plague, save mankind. Scavenge for parts and build your own ultimate weapon. Cracking open the box here, we can even see the front manual is all that good black and white. We have the online pass for this one. This was so that you could even play co-op. You cannot play co-op without your online pass, and that still exists to this day. I actually, to do co-op, I had to go online to like a G2A site and get I think it was Origin version of the online pass so that I could access it all these years later. Like, they did this obviously as a profit play, but all this time later, you still need the online pass. It's ridiculous. But anyway, inside the manual, nothing crazy here. A pretty thin one. Just a table of contents for how you can get online, link your online ID, all that stuff. Nothing about the video game itself. It just says, actually, this isn't even the manual because the manual is available online. So this was around that era, 2013, where we were abandoning that and you were starting to open up complete in-box copies that just had nothing on the left side, even though they had the manual clips regardless. All right, so let's talk about the good. This is a positively skewed channel, so I'll do my best here. I want to talk about the ultimate weapon building. I love the bench in Dead Space 1 and 2. I thought they were great progression trees, but in Dead Space 3 is where you really got to mix and match all types of demented weapons. And you could make weapons of mass destruction that could shoot out like bullets that explode, and then have like a fusion rifle on the top that shoots out a grenade launcher. Like, you can mix and match to your heart's content. That level of customization was a ton of fun because Dead Space 3 stripped away a lot of the survival horror tension and really went for balls to the wall action. Big set piece bosses, 1,000,001 loading screens because they had to take this route. Also because they added co-op and they didn't make it a single player experience. And this is a game that is clearly, like, I can't help myself, right? I was trying to talk positively, but I can't help myself. It was clearly supposed to be a single player spacefaring adventure, right? Because the first 7 chapters-ish of the game are you going from space station to space station, this kind of open level exploration that they were actually going to do in Dead Space 4. They were going to make like this sort of open world-ish space game. And that sounded really cool as you go from all these abandoned spaceships. And they toyed with that in Dead Space 3. And then you crash down on this snowy planet and everything falls apart. Because it's then and there you realize that these were like 2 philosophies for what Dead Space 3 should be combined together. And it kind of ended up being both the killing blow to the series as well as Visceral Games themselves, because now they are no longer with us, sadly, by the way, because I love how EA shuts them down, then only years later says, oh, we're gonna remake Dead Space now, and we're gonna get rid of the guys and gals who did that in the first place. Like, it's just why EA is terrible. They just can't help themselves but ruin so many things. I think they've been better as of late because they've been more hands-off, but that's the thing. You shouldn't be a company that, for you to function properly, needs to just be like this constantly. Like, oh, we don't touch it. We're not going to do anything. Nothing at all. Anyway, I'm getting on my rant here. Co-op for this game was kind of cool. It was great at its time because, again, they were trying to like push more copies, get more people to play it. That's why they did multiplayer. Then they did co-op. It makes sense on paper, but I feel like it was a business decision more than anything, and that to really maintain the integrity and DNA of a Dead Space franchise, you needed to make sure that this was a single-player game first and foremost and design it around that. And that's why I say it's like two ideas mixed together, because when you're on the spaceships and you're traveling around, it feels like a single-player game because all the areas are very narrow, claustrophobic, and it could be a pretty decent game. But then suddenly they take you planet side and it's all open. There's no tension. There's no sound design that's really creeping you out. The best part is when you go down into these bunkers and you see certain things and your co-op partner sees certain things. That is definitely the thing about Dead Space that I really loved. Like when you are playing with James and you're Isaac, James will hallucinate certain things and Isaac will hallucinate certain things thanks to the marker. I really like some pieces of this game. That is one of them. I love that despite all you did in these games to prevent things from happening on Earth, that the people on Earth bring the problem of the necromorphs to themselves because they're being led by this like church that's a bunch of zealots that believed in a guy in the first game who was done wrong. They built upon that in Dead Space 2 and made their whole entire faction on the sprawl. And then their main antagonist in Dead Space 3. So the setup for Dead Space 3 is pretty good. It's the execution of it that absolutely flounders. And so for a lot of people, I imagine this is like a guilty pleasure game, but there's just so many moments of like, I'm dumbfounded. Why does this happen this way? Like, Isaac is betrayed by someone who's working for Jacob of the Unitologists. And so Isaac kills him because it was a life or death moment and he was about to be killed by this military leader. And so Ellie's like, Isaac, how could you? How could you? And Isaac just refuses to say this whole segment, oh, well, the guy kind of had a gun to my head and was about to kill me, so I had to kill him first. You know? I was about to die. Would you have rather that? And it's just, the plot intentionally trips over itself because if it explains itself, then they start to hit like these narrative stopgaps and it just becomes a complete mess, which it is. So that's really my big problem with Dead Space 3. The gameplay suffers because of the 1,000,001 invisible loading screens, like these rotating doors. Oh my God. And then the story is bad. They remove all the tension. So the best thing about it is the space section, in my opinion, and then the co-op sections with the dungeon crawling. But even then, like, no more scares, no more tension. It's just all different and gone. And for me, I just can't get into it. Even to this day, I just replayed it last year from start to finish. It was like my third time doing so. It's still not a good game. But Dead Space 1 and 2, absolutely worth playing. What's interesting is Dead Space 1, you get it on the Xbox 360. Yeah, sorry, no FPS boost for this one. But Dead Space 2 and 3, oh yeah, these got FPS boost because EA knows what they're doing. Xbox and EA know what they're doing, right? We can't get FPS boost on this one because if the remake sucks, then you'll have a way to opt out. So that's why I got them on PS3 outside of that, because for me, I just want to have a complete inline experience across all consoles. Not like 1 on 360, 2 on 360, 3 on PS3. I didn't want that. I wanted them all in one place. So that is our memory of the Dead Space video games. A lot of good times, some bad times, but mostly incredibly fond memories. Do you remember the Dead Space games as well as I do? Do you love them as much as I do? Fire away. Other than that, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you all in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.